Picture this. It's the year 1694. The British government is broke, completely broke. Not tight on funds broke, I mean the king might pawn the crown jewels broke. And from that chaos, from that desperate scramble for cash, Britain would accidentally create something that would shape every credit card swipe, every online payment, and every central bank on earth today. Welcome to the story of how one financial blunder gave birth to modern banking. Let's rewind to late 17th century England, a time of powdered wigs, wooden ships, and an empire running on IOUs. The country had just been through wars, revolutions, and enough political drama to make Netflix jealous. King William III, yes, that William from William and Mary, was trying to keep Britain's war machine running against France. The problem? He had no money. Taxes were already sky high, the people were restless, and the wealthy elites were tired of lending to the crown because, well, the crown had a bit of a reputation for not paying people back. Imagine lending money to a friend who keeps throwing parties with it, then says, "Sorry mate, I'll pay you next century." That was basically the British government. So the crown turned to a new idea, a radical one, something that would quietly change the world. Enter William Paterson, a Scottish merchant and part-time visionary, or con artist depending who you ask. Paterson had a pitch. Lend money to the government and in return you'll get a royal charter to create a bank. Not just any bank, the Bank of England. The plan was simple, almost laughably so. A group of investors would lend £1.2 million to the crown, an enormous sum back then, and the new bank would have the right to issue banknotes, effectively creating money out of thin air. Wait, creating money out of thin air? Yep. That's the big twist. The government owed the bank money, and the bank printed notes backed by that debt. In other words, Britain literally monetized its own debt. And the public accepted those notes because they trusted the government's promise to repay. Congratulations, England, you've just invented fractional reserve banking. At first, no one realized how revolutionary this was. The rich thought it was just another boring investment scheme. The poor didn't care, they had bigger problems like not starving. But beneath the surface, something huge had changed. Before this, money was mostly gold and silver, physical, heavy, and limited. Now, the concept of money became abstract, paper, trust, faith in the system. The government had found a way to create liquidity out of debt, to summon wealth from promises, and this accident became the foundation of the entire modern economy. Because every central bank since, from the Federal Reserve to the European Central Bank, has followed this same formula. Money is no longer metal. It's a story we agree to believe in. Of course, once you create a system based on trust, it's only a matter of time before people stop trusting it. And they did. Many times. The 1700s and 1800s were full of bank runs, moments when everyone rushed to withdraw their gold, only to realize the bank didn't have it. Why? Because banks had lent most of it out. It was a magic trick, one that only worked as long as nobody tried to look behind the curtain. But here's the paradox. Every time the system nearly collapsed, governments doubled down. They regulated more, centralized more, and eventually built the modern central banking structure to stabilize it. What began as an improvised money hack to fund a war turned into the backbone of global finance. It's like if duct taping your car door once inspired the entire auto industry. If you're hooked so far, imagine what's coming next. This single accident didn't just save Britain's empire, it reshaped how the entire world creates and controls money. Hit that subscribe button now, because what happens next is where the real financial sorcery begins. With the Bank of England's model in place, something fascinating happened. Confidence in paper money grew, and with it, Britain's financial power exploded. Lending became easier, trade boomed, wars could be financed without mountains of gold. And soon, Britain wasn't just a military empire, it became a financial empire. London became the beating heart of global finance.
Foreign governments started depositing gold there, borrowing in pounds, and modelling their own central banks after Britain's experiment. The pound sterling became the world's first true reserve currency. For nearly 200 years, the sun never set on the British banking system. But here's the catch. This system didn't make everyone rich. While it fueled innovation and empire, it also fueled inequality, speculation, and bubbles. Because when money can be created from credit, greed tends to multiply faster than gold. Sound familiar? Let's pause for a second and appreciate how absurd this was. Britain, a nation once mocked for its debt, had turned that very debt into a strength. It weaponized finance. It turned IOUs into influence. By the 19th century, the British government didn't need to conquer you with soldiers. They could just lend you money and own your future. This was the silent takeover, the era of financial imperialism. And the more other countries copied Britain's model, the more entrenched the system became. Paper replaced gold, credit replaced cash, and soon belief replaced bullion. But here's the truly wild part. The Bank of England wasn't created by a grand vision of financial genius. It was created by panic, by desperation, by a broke king trying to survive a war. No one at that time said, "Let's design the foundation of the global economy." It just happened. History's funny like that. The biggest revolutions don't always come from great plans. Sometimes they come from trying not to go bankrupt. And yet from this messy accident emerged the DNA of every modern financial system. Central banks managing credit and trust, governments issuing debt as money, entire nations running on the illusion that numbers on a screen equal real wealth. It's all a beautiful, dangerous balancing act built on faith. So, what can we learn from Britain's financial oops moment? First, that crisis breeds innovation. Britain didn't create the banking system out of greed, it did it out of necessity. And that necessity forced them to rethink what money could mean. Second, that trust is the most valuable currency. The British pound didn't dominate because of its metal content, it dominated because people believed in it. And finally, every time we swipe a card, take a loan, or trade crypto, we're still living in the echo of that 17th century gamble. We're all participants in the longest-running magic trick in human history, the creation of money from belief. Of course, no system lasts forever. Eventually, Britain's financial dominance gave way to America's. The US Federal Reserve, founded in 1913, borrowed directly from the Bank of England's playbook, just with more paperwork and less royalty. And today, central banks around the world still play the same game, controlling inflation, printing money, buying debt, and praying no one panics too quickly. It's the same fragile system, just with better branding. But make no mistake, this system's roots trace back to that one desperate moment in 1694 when Britain accidentally turned its debt into the world's most powerful invention. If you loved uncovering this hidden piece of financial history, hit that subscribe button, because next time we're diving into how a single banana company overthrew governments and reshaped global trade. Trust me, it makes the Bank of England look like a polite tea party. Because in the world of money, accidents have consequences that echo for centuries. And Britain's little financial accident, it didn't just create a bank, it created the world we live in.
Let's be honest, calling it an accident makes it sound like everyone just tripped and fell into capitalism. But there was a strange genius behind it all. The 17th century was an age of experimentation, not just with science, but with money itself. Merchants, traders, and governments were all fumbling with one question. How can we make wealth grow faster than gold? Gold was solid, sure, but it was slow. You had to dig it up, melt it, guard it, and transport it. Paper credit, on the other hand, was light, fast, and infinitely expandable. A dream come true for anyone who wanted power without limits. So when the Bank of England started printing those first banknotes, it was like giving the economy wings. For the first time, money wasn't chained to metal, it was chained to imagination. And that, ironically, made it far more dangerous. Because when you realize you can create money with promises, you start wondering, how far can we push this? Spoiler alert, humans are terrible at moderation. Once Britain discovered it could fund wars, trade, and empire building through credit, there was no going back. Napoleon once mocked the British, saying they were a nation of shopkeepers. He was wrong. They were a nation of bankers with battleships. Every loan funded a fleet. Every bond built an empire. Every piece of debt was a stepping stone to domination. And the best part? The world trusted them. Why? Because the Bank of England had mastered the art of reliability. Whenever there was a crisis, they paid out, stabilized, or simply convinced everyone it was fine. Confidence was their greatest export. Britain had figured out a secret weapon. Control the money supply, and you control the world. The ripple effects were insane. Amsterdam, which had once been Europe's financial center, faded. Paris tried to catch up and failed spectacularly when John Law's paper money scheme imploded in the 1720s, a cautionary tale for another episode. Meanwhile, London became the place to borrow, lend, and speculate. By the 1800s, British financial influence was everywhere. South America, financed by British loans. Indian railways, funded by London bankers. The Suez Canal, yep, British money again. The British didn't need to invade to control. They could just own your debt. Financial strings were more effective than armies. That's the part of history they don't put in textbooks. He who controls the credit controls the crown. But behind all that success, there was always tension. Every boom carried a hidden bomb. Every period of growth led to a financial panic. The South Sea Bubble of 1720 was one of the first. Thousands of people invested in get-rich-quick companies, including one literally called a company for carrying out an undertaking of great advantage, but nobody to know what it is. Yes, that was the real name, and yes, people bought it. When the bubble burst, fortunes vanished overnight, and yet Britain's banking system survived. Because the Bank of England stepped in to stabilize things. Sound familiar? It should, because this was the 18th century version of a bailout. They invented quantitative easing before it was cool. Here's the weird part. People knew this system was risky. They knew it was built on debt, confidence, and paper. But they still believed in it. Why? Because believing in money feels better than facing chaos. Money isn't just economics. It's psychology. It's the collective agreement that this thing has value because we all say so. The Bank of England's greatest trick wasn't inventing paper money. It was inventing trust at scale. And to this day, every economy runs on that same fragile psychology. From Wall Street to your wallet, it's all one giant synchronized illusion that somehow keeps working. Soon, every other country wanted their own Bank of England. France tried again. Germany built one. Even America, which loved rebelling against Britain, eventually said, hey, maybe this banking thing isn't so bad. And in 1913, the US created the Federal Reserve, the spiritual descendant of Britain's accidental invention. The irony? The system designed by a broke monarchy to fund wars became the system used by the world's biggest democracy to fund everything. Britain may have lost its empire on land, but it quietly passed on its empire of money. Fast forward to today. When central banks print money, buy bonds, or control interest rates, they're all echoing that same 1694 decision. We still live in a world where debt creates money, and confidence keeps it spinning. The digital revolution didn't change that. It just made it faster. Those glowing numbers in your banking app, they're just 21st century banknotes, the descendants of Britain's first paper promises. And crypto, it's the rebellion against that 300-year-old idea, a protest against trust in governments, replaced with trust in code. But even Bitcoin can't escape the ghost of 1694, because at the heart of it all, money is still about belief, and belief is the most powerful currency of all. Here's the punchline to this entire saga. The system that built modern prosperity also built modern crisis. It gave us innovation, industry, and infrastructure, but it also gave us bubbles, crashes, and recessions. Every boom traces its DNA back to the same British invention, and every bust reminds us that belief can crumble as fast as it's created. So yes, Britain accidentally built the modern banking system, but they also built the modern financial anxiety that comes with it. And maybe that's the price of progress, a world where our wealth is no longer measured in gold, but in trust. Next time you swipe your card or transfer money online, think about it. That number on your screen isn't gold, silver, or even paper. It's a digital echo of an IOU made 331 years ago by a desperate government in London. A moment of panic that became a monument of power. An accident that became the architecture of the global economy. And somewhere, William Patterson, the man who pitched the idea, is probably laughing in his grave, because his words back then turned out to be prophecy. The bank hath benefit of interest on all the money which it creates out of nothing. Out of nothing came everything. If you enjoyed uncovering this story, if you love the idea that behind every coin, bill, or credit line, there's a wild piece of history, then subscribe to the Money Archive right now, because next time we're digging into how one single company used money, propaganda, and politics to own half the planet's bananas, and how that shaped the modern world of corporate power. You won't believe how deep this rabbit hole goes. Remember, every dollar, every pound, every promise started with an accident. And that accident was British.